Thank you very much, Professor Anas, for the invitation. I'm privileged to be here in this meeting. As you know, the quest towards spectacle independence after cataract surgery had passed through many stages. We had what's known as the bifocal lenses, which is sometimes known as the multifocal lenses. However, these lenses did not gain a wide acceptance because of the associated visual dysphotopsias and their limited ability to provide a decent near vision. Why there is a visual dysphotopsis with the multifocal lenses? Because these lenses work by the principle of the simultaneous perception, where the distance and near foci create superimposed image on the retina, and that's why the patient might complain of nighttime halos and glare. On the other hand, with the diffractive technology, because of the splitting of the light rays into distance and near foci, we have around 19% of the light energy lost inside the eye into unuseful foci. So the patient will always complain of reduced contrast sensitivity because of the lost light energy by the diffractive optics. Now we have the trifocal IOLs, and the trifocal IOLs can address some of the limited intermediate vision with the bifocal lenses. So these lenses provide a decent functional intermediate as well as distance and near vision. They are known by limitation of the visual dysphotopsias compared to the bifocal lenses. However, still visual dysphotopsias are reported by some of these lenses, and again, these lenses require a strict selection criteria, patient selection criteria, to be implanted successfully inside the eye. The new concept of the extended depth of focus, or EDOF lenses, has been introduced into the market for about 1 decade ago. It utilizes the diffractive technology not to split the light rays into distant and near foci, but rather to direct the light rays into a series of extended. We have the same concept of the EDOF lenses by spherical aberration across the lens optic. So we can have EDOF lens by alternating zones of spherical aberration across the lens optic to direct the light rays into distance and near foci. Another concept is by wavefront stretching and shifting of the light rays, so we have extended depths of focus. Or we can sometimes add a central zone of aspheric refractive zone on the central part of the lens optic to direct the light rays into intermediate focus. So these lenses perform quite well in terms of distance as well as intermediate vision with minimal dysphotopsias compared to the other presbyopia correcting IOLs. However, centration might be critical due to the presence of zones across the lens optic. So sometimes decentration of the lens might be a new concept of polynomial technologies to direct the light rays with the isopure lens of baby eye. These lenses utilize the polynomial technologies as well as spherical aberration up to 10th order of higher order aberration to direct and extend the depth of focus of the light rays across the patient retina. So this lens can provide a decent intermediate vision as well as excellent distant vision, very comparable to the monofocal lens. The lens does not have zone across the lens optic, so I think minimal, or the function of this lens won't be affected by some degree of decentration. So because of there is no zones across the lens optic, and again the polynomial technologies is present on both anterior and posterior surfaces of the lens to provide the maximum depth of focus for intermediate vision by this lens. This lens has variable spherical aberration across the lens optic to ensure constant depth of focus into photopic pupil, as well as with mesopic pupil and scotopic pupil. We have tested this lens clinically with the OPD3, and we have a depth of focus of around 1.75 diopters with the OPD aberrometer. Again, with the eye trace, we have an average depth of focus of 1.6 diopters with the isopure lens after implantation into the patient's eye. This lens provides excellent contrastivity, very comparable to the monofocal lens in terms of photopic as well as mesopic contrastivity. Why? There is enhanced contrastivity with this lens comparable to the other presbyopia correcting lenses, because this lens utilizes 100% of the light rays after implantation. There is no splitting, there is no zones across the optic of these lenses. This lens comes with the preloaded system that utilize only 3 simple steps so the lens can be implanted easily inside the eye. The first step is loading the cartridge into the injector and then removal of the stopper. The second step is injection of BSS or OVD into the lens cartridge. And the third step is to pushing the plunger so the lens can be implanted easily inside the eye. This lens comes with a proprietary pressure release system, so minimal pressure is required on the plunger to ensure smooth delivery and smooth unfolding of the lens inside the eye. When to implant the isopure lens? I think we can implant the isopure lens if the surgeon is not acquainted with the presbyopia correcting IOLs, especially the trifocal technology, or if the surgeon is not sure about the patient is a very good candidate for presbyopia correcting lenses with the potential associated visual dysphotopsias, or if you are a conservative surgeon, or you would like to add a value for your patient with much less price. For example, this is one of my patients. He is a pilot, 58 years old, and he was interested in presbyopia correcting IOLs. So I was reluctant to implant the trifocal lenses because of his occupation. So I opted to implant an isopure lens, and the patient was pretty happy with the results, and he is still able to fly with this extended depth of focus lens. As you can see, this patient has some degree of with the rule of astigmatism, and to nail this small amount of astigmatism and provide the maximum potential vision after implantation, I assigned this patient with femtosecond laser technology so we can nail this astigmatism by astigmatic keratotomy at the time of the cataract surgery. And as you can see, after implantation, the lens is pretty well centered because of the closed loop haptic designs, and the patient was very pleased with the results. And this is the refraction after implantation of the lens. And with the astigmatic keratotomy, you could reduce the astigmatism to 0.5 and 0.4 in the right and left eye, respectively. This is another patient. She is 67 years old. She is a grandmother, and she is interested in presbyopia correcting IOLs. However, because of the large angle kappa with this lady, so I was reluctant to implant a trifocal lens. So I opted to implant an isopure lens, and the patient was pretty happy with the results. And the large angle kappa did not have too much effect on the visual outcomes of this patient. So the patient is still pretty happy and enjoyed decent distant visual as well as intermediate functional vision. This is another patient who is 63 years old with personality type A, and because of some irregularities on the anterior surface of the cornea of the right and the left eye, and because of the personality type A, the patient every time steps inside my office has 2 pages of A4 paper full of questions asking about the technology of the lenses and the potential side effects, and etc. So I opted to implant the isopure lens for this guy, and he is pretty happy with the results. So my final message that the isopure lens is filling the gap between the presbyopia correcting lenses and the monofocal lenses. It is as simple as the monofocal lens in terms of implantation, but with less strict criteria compared to the trifocal lenses, and it is considered a safe entry to the contest of the presbyopia correcting IOLs. Thank you very much for your attention.